James J. Kramer credits Shackleton's optimistic example with nothing less than rescuing him from financial ruin and relative obscurity just months before he gained success, personal wealth, and international fame as a major player on Wall Street. "Shackleton saved my life," he says simply. Mr. Kramer read about Shackleton in late 1998 at the end of the worst year of his professional life. His New York-based hedge fund, Kramer, Berkowitz and Company, was in its deepest slump since its launch in 1987. A tumbling stock market in the second half of the year caused the aggressive fund to lose $100 million and finished the year with just a 2% return on assets. "People were pulling out capital," Mr. Kramer recalls. "I personally lost $15 million. It was time to hunker down." He was also having headaches at his fledgling financial news website, TheStreet.com, which he co-founded in 1996 with Martin Peretz, owner and editor of the New Republic. In 1998, the company's losses widened dramatically to $16.4 million from $5.8 million the previous year, even though revenue had surged past the $1 million mark. It came to the point where Mr. Kramer had to ask himself and his backers, "Are we knocked out?" He called his partners and found a level of pessimism that surprised and overwhelmed him. They told him to fold. He felt defeated. "You drag yourself to work every morning, but you're down and people are laughing at you," he says, recalling the torture of having to face staff and colleagues at his Wall Street office every day. Then he found Shackleton. After seeing an article about the explorer in National Geographic, Mr. Kramer read Endurance by Alfred Lansing, and then Shackleton's account of the same expedition, South. "I felt like this really was the philosophy, for life too, but for business especially," he says. Amid all the voices telling him to give up, he heard Shackleton telling him to stick with it. He started writing quotations from Shackleton in red marker on the whiteboard in his office to bolster his and his staff's spirits. "Optimism is true moral courage, stayed up through the entire 1998 sell-off," Mr. Kramer says. "If I hadn't been schooled by Shackleton, I would have given up," he says. "It was the worst year I ever had. He got me through it because everybody tells you to give up. But I came back in a style that was unbelievable and proved the pessimists were wrong." Wrong indeed. By early 1999, his interests had made a dramatic turnaround, and he was catapulted into fame and a good deal of fortune. The New York Times Company and Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation took minority stakes in TheStreet.com and eventually set up joint ventures. His hedge fund, which had tumbled to about $180 million in assets in 1998, more than doubled in value. The big payoff came in May 1999 when TheStreet.com went public. Mr. Kramer's Shackleton-like media savvy and gift for gab had created such a buzz about the company that demand for its shares swamped the Nasdaq stock market. Trading of the shares was delayed until 2 hours after opening. When the stock was finally offered, the price per share surged to $73, almost 4 times the $19 initial offering price, and then settled at $60 for the close. About 13.5 million shares of TheStreet.com were traded that day. Based on the initial closing price, total market capitalization for the company was estimated at $1.42 billion. That meant the 40-year-old Mr. Kramer's stake in the company was valued at more than $215 million, at a time when his annual salary was $250,000. The company drew international attention. Subscriptions and visits to the site surged, more staff was added, and the company moved into bigger quarters. Mr. Kramer, as a trader and a market commentator, must maintain a cautious distance from activities of TheStreet.com and doesn't work from its offices. Never mind that the company was never profitable, revenue in 1999 more than tripled. The bottom line was irrelevant for pioneer Internet concerns, market bulls reasoned. TheStreet.com represents the future, said USA Today. Credit for the success went to Mr. Kramer, whom the paper described as having the look of an over-caffeinated poster boy for the Type A set. Mr. Kramer's cheerful face, sporting a red goatee, could be seen everywhere after that, prompting the Wall Street Journal to call him a Wall Street lightning rod for attention and publicity. He appeared on network television and on cable news shows. In addition to writing his own online columns, brazenly called Wrong, he turned out articles for other magazines and newspapers and forged alliances with numerous media and corporate outlets. His enormous popularity prompted Talk magazine to name him one of the 50 Americans people listened to in 1999. Mr. Kramer's commentary is brashly in your face. He rants about outmoded concepts in finance and teases the dead tree boys in the print media. With characteristic chutzpah, he declares TheStreet.com is the people's choice. In 1 year, Mr. Kramer had made a stellar comeback from the brink. There was such unbelievable pressure to give up and call it quits, he recalls. Had he done so, he says now, it would have been the dumbest decision of my life. Mr. Kramer, a Harvard graduate, served as president of the Harvard Crimson before going on to get a law degree from the university. He worked for a time as a journalist and helped found Smart Money magazine. He had a stint in the private client services unit of Goldman Sachs and Company before he launched Kramer and Company in 1987 with his wife Karen. He was joined about 4 years later by Jeff Berkowitz. Today, Mr. Kramer, who has an interest in history, has a photograph of Sir Ernest in his office, with a note in Shackleton's handwriting dated to the Nimrod expedition that he bought at auction. When he hires people now, Mr. Kramer thinks of how Shackleton analysed his crew. He chooses optimists, he says, and those who share his ideas and hopes for his business. He concedes he's still striving to more fully emulate the explorer. I wish I could be a little more like him, he laments. People respected him in his position in a way I could only dream of. There was a respectful distance between him and his men. I'm too buddy-buddy. As the new century dawned, some of the sizzle had gone out of Internet stocks, and TheStreet.com was again being battered. 1 year after the red-hot IPO, the company had gone through a shake-up of top management. The stock had fallen to below its opening price, and the site had become mostly free of charge. Mr. Kramer gave up his salary in favour of stock options, and there were rumours of a pending sale. He continued to ignore the naysayers, however, insisting that those working hard toward a goal must stay optimistic. If you surround yourself with pessimists, you're doomed to failure in business, Mr. Kramer says. They are the voices you can't let in your head. If you listen to the pessimists, you'll make the wrong decision or be so confused and so befuddled you'll lose the emotional energy you need.